अस्सलाम वालेकुम नाजरीन, मैं हूँ आपकी सहेली, आपकी दोस्त हिना जनेजो। तो नाजरीन, आज जिस मौजू के हवाले से हम तबसरा करने जा रहे हैं, वो मौजू, वो टॉपिक न सिर्फ एक तकलीफ है, बल्कि एक बीमारी बन के रह गया है हमारी कम्युनिटी में। इस बीमारी ने, इस तकलीफ ने तकरीबन तकरीबन तमाम तर घरों को अपनी लपेट में लिया हुआ है। जी नाजरीन, इस बीमारी, इस तकलीफ का नाम है ड्रग एडिक्शन। और तकरीबन हर घर के अंदर कम से कम एक बच्चा, नहीं तो चंद अदद बच्चे इस ड्रग एडिक्शन का शिकार हैं। और हमारे वालिदैन जो हैं वो कंप्लीटली स्ट्रेस हुए हुए हैं, एंग्शियस हुए हुए हैं कि क्या वो वजूहात हैं, क्या मामलात हैं, क्या हालात हैं जिनकी वजह से हमारे बच्चे इस बीमारी, इस तकलीफ का शिकार हो जाते हैं। और इसी मौजू के हवाले से मजीद जानकारी हासिल करने के लिए हमारे आज मेहमान खुसूसी हैं साफ बख्शी, जो कि ह्यूमन बिहेवियरल कंसल्टेंट हैं, स्पेशलिस्ट भी हैं, चूंकि वो खुद इस बीमारी का शिकार रह चुके हैं बहुत लंबे अरसे तक। और 4 साल पहले तक अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह उन्होंने इस बीमारी से निजात हासिल कर ली थी और खैराबाद कह दिया था अपनी ज़िंदगी के उस मंज़िल को। तो आज हम उन्हीं की ज़बानी मज़ीद जानने की कोशिश करेंगे कि वो क्या वजूहात हैं जिनकी वजह से हमारे बच्चे इस बीमारी का शिकार हो जाते हैं, और किस तरह से हम मालूमात हासिल कर सकते हैं, वो क्या साइंस हैं जिनके मद्देनज़र हम समझ सकें कि हमारे बच्चे इस बीमारी से एडिक्टेड हैं। तो चलिए नाज़रीन, चलते हैं हम अपने मेहमान खुसूसी की तरफ, सैफ बख्शी। अस्सलाम वालेकुम ब्रदर सैफ, हाउ आर यू एंड वेलकम
Wa
ऑन बोर्ड।
Walaikum salam, Sister Hina. Alhamdulillah. Very well. Thank you for having me again. How are you? You okay?
Alhamdulillah, I'm very well. Always looking forward to having you on board and discussing such a critical topic with you and being able to get such vital information from you, because obviously you're not only somebody who has a lot of knowledge around the subject matter, but you've experienced it firsthand yourself. So it's like a holistic approach you take towards sharing the information with our viewers, alhamdulillah. So let's just dive straight into it, Brother Saf. The first question today would be, I'm curious to know, or based on your experience, you can tell me, why do some people, get more prone towards being addicted and the others don't really?
Yeah. And I get this question asked so many times to me, sister, and it's there isn't a specific answer. But the question I ask myself is not why the addiction, is why the pain. And and people ask me, well, what drugs are addictive? It's not the drugs that are addictive. Drugs aren't addictive at all. Otherwise, we'd all be addicts. Yeah, behavior addiction is not. Otherwise, we'd all be behavioral addicts. Uh, if 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 anybody would have a drink or a drug, they would immediately be addicts. It's not about that. It's about the dopamine rush. Okay, but why we all have dopamine? Yeah, we all have we have an upper and lower mind, and we have the amygdala, which is the lower mind, if you like, and we're always trying to reach the dopamine fix. Uh, we as individuals are governed by this dopamine fix, but the question is why do we need certain things in our life, whether it be alcohol, drugs, shopping, video games, um, anything that we do excessively or anything that we become addicted to, why do we all have the need for this dopamine rush? So the question is, or the answer is, if you like, is what is missing in our life? Addiction for me was never the problem. And I think it's never the problem for anyone else. It's the solution, what they perceive and what I perceive to the problem. Um, and usually, in my experience, something is missing in our life for us to go towards that way, for us to choose. Because initially, it is a choice. Initially, we choose whether to take a drink or drug. as human beings. We choose that. What leads us to that is, it can vary. It can be from trauma. It can be, but usually it is trauma, or it could be some kind of escape. Uh, Peer pressure is a big one, where you first try something out, especially in the societies that we live in, not just in England, but globally. It's a problem. Even in our countries, in Pakistan, in India, it's a massive problem, drug addiction.
Yeah.
In Pakistan, in the Punjab area, there's a massive heroin epidemic there. Huge. And the whole of India, marijuana, cannabis, and of course heroin as well. So it's not, it doesn't just happen in the Western society, it happens in the global society. So the question is not why the addiction, it's why the pain.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. I agree with you on that 100%, that there's definitely something that is pinching us, that is hurting us from within, and we try to run away from that rather than facing it and looking for a solution for that specific problem. We try to escape from that, and I think in pursuit of that escape and not wanting to face that trauma or whatever that problem may be, we try to then consume and just maybe indulge in these kind of habits or addictions, if you like. So, but this app, I'm wondering what properties are there in these drugs that they literally
Mm.
elope people, in themselves, consume them, and at the end, the end result then becomes addiction. What kind of
Mm.
properties do these drugs
But again, and I'm a strong believer. It's not so much the drugs or the behavior that make us do something. It's the dopamine rush behind it. It's because, as I said before, if, for example, I could be quite certain that if you were, for example, to have a glass of wine or whatever right now, I would be pretty much certain that you probably wouldn't be addicted straight away. I
have?
would probably, hands down, it wouldn't. Because not everyone who drinks wine, or not everyone who takes cocaine, or not everyone who takes any drugs, or not everyone who goes shopping, or everyone who plays video game becomes an addict. So there isn't a specific thing within those things that is addictive. It really is the person. It's about the mindset. I remember when I took my first drink, it was one because of peer pressure, but also it was a massive. It numbed the pain that I was going through. It helped me escape. So for me, I perceived it as a solution. It was like a solution to my problem. My problem was, as I mentioned in the previous show, was abuse. I was receiving abuse of all kinds on a daily basis for 6 years, and it was alcohol at that time that numbed the pain. So I used alcohol. Alcohol came into my life, and what I thought at the time as a savior. Okay, if I had spoken about this to other people, if I had gone to my parents, if I'd gone to someone who was wiser than myself, maybe, just maybe, I would have found a different solution, and it wouldn't have been drink and drugs. The problem happened is that because at such a young age, I found alcohol and drugs as a solution to any problem that I was going through. I took that with me to adult life, and I used that as a solution for everything. So it wasn't so much the drink or the drug that was addictive, it was my way of dealing with a problem that was occurring in my life. And thereafter, for many years in adult life, that's how I dealt with it. Um, See, we have the amygdala, okay, and with the amygdala we're constantly looking for the dopamine fix, okay, and people who do that, which is a lot of people, right, we become vulnerable, and basically we're going to be sold the fantasy. The fantasy is a definition of pleasure without pain, happiness without sadness, positivity without negativity. We we as humans are sold a fantasy about living a one-sided perception. So we try to, well, we very rarely look at the two sides of perception. So if you imagine, if you've got a magnet and you hold a magnet and you try and chop it in half, um, and get the one side, what's going to happen with the magnet? It's still going to have a positive and negative, right? So what I'm trying to say is that in life, where it's and this is the problem with a lot of people, where when something negative happens, we just look at the negative. We don't look at the benefits of the negative. When something positive happens, we just focus on the positive because we're scared of looking at the negatives. And then we have to look at both sides and bring it to a level. Um, because people do believe that there is a heaven, there's not a hell, but there's two. There is a positive, there is a negative, there is pleasure. But you can't have pleasure without pain. You can't have pain without pleasure. If you're wise and you understand Maxwell's equations, you know you can't get a positive without a negative. A magnet has a wholeness of both. Um, and I think that's where we get lost sometimes. So when I'm with my clients in particular, um, clients who have an addiction, and it could be anything, I first ask them a simple question. I ask them the question, what are the benefits? What are the benefits of you drinking alcohol? Because you've obviously done it because you've perceived it to be beneficial for you in some way. It's given you something, okay? And literally, sister, some clients write 50, 60, 100 benefits down. Okay, and you might ask the question, so why are we talking about benefits of something that's not good for you, something that's consequential?
That's
Because
consequential because
I need to know
I need to know
I need to know
I need to know
what the benefits are.
what the benefits are.
What is making them
What is making them
do this?
do this?
Why are they?
Why
What
are
is
they?
missing in their
What is
life
missing in their
for
life
them to do this?
for them to do this?
So when I get all the benefits,
So
we
when I get
write
all
it
the
down.
benefits, we write it.
So then I want to balance it out by looking at the drawbacks, because we have to look at both sides. If we ignore the reason why the individual is doing drugs, is shopping a lot, is playing video games, if we ignore that reason, we're only looking at one side, and we're actually running away from the reasons why they're doing it. We have to, as individuals, a lot of people work like this, but with my clients, with my human behavioral research, and through working with my mentors, Dr. John DeMartini and Dr. Gabor Mate, we look at both sides. As I said, there's no predator without a prey. There's no prey without a predator. We have to look at both sides. Too many people in this world need a one-sided perception. One side. There's two sides to everything. And people choose to, and that's why when you see these motivational speakers or people, all they talk about is positive, 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 and they're not even addressing the negativity, which I think can be very harmful, and and the person will not lead a fulfilling life. So even if you're doing something negative, you look at the benefits. What is beneficial for them doing that negative? And then we look at the drawbacks of the positives, and you bring it to an equilibrium. Once we're on a straight line, once we brought it here, only then we have a chance to live a fulfilling life. Only then we have a chance to be empowered as individuals. Because if we're striving for a one-sided world, and by definition I call it the fantasy, yeah, and the opposite of that is a nightmare. So if you strive for a one-sided world, the more your life becomes a nightmare. Simple as that. Because you're striving for something that's not available, and you're trying to avoid something that is unavoidable.
Absolutely. You're basically living on extreme ends, either this way or that way. You need to be able to figure out a, smooth balance for yourself whereby you feel safe, you feel comfortable, and you feel positive in a flow state at all times. And I think the reason why all the motivation or most of the motivational speakers basically highlight the, positivity or positive side of everything is because words are really, really powerful, based on the information that you're giving to your subconscious mind, because that's where all the action takes place. So if we take an example of drugs, if we tell ourselves this is good for us, obviously that's the message we're giving to our subconscious mind. And then accordingly, we're going to start start acting upon it. And on the hindsight, if we go into the effect rather than the cause and balance it out, thinking that it's going to, have more detrimental effects on us than reaping any benefits in short run and in long term either. So then obviously we're going to be acting accordingly, and we'll try to get done with it as soon as possible, be able to detoxicate our system, our mind, our body from this, what would I say? I really have no words to express, or any term to justify drug abuse, really. I think this addiction is, as we call it in Urdu, bimari. It's an ailment, and we need to deal with it appropriately. So, but this stuff, how can a parent identify, those signs if the child is fallen prey to addiction?
Yeah, I think one of the signs is detachment from the family routine. Um, Isolation is a big one as well. Um, your child might be in the room all the time, or even doing things out of the ordinary, going out all the time, coming back late, not communicating like they used to, um, ignoring things that are being told to do, not attending family functions, not socializing, being quite drawn back. These are the behavioral changes that you may see in a child. Very similar in some cases to depression. Um, they might be sleeping a lot as well, because if they have been drinking or taking drugs heavily, and especially drugs that keep you awake, there will be a time where you get a come down. And when you get a come down, the only way to deal with that is to sleep. So they'll be sleeping more than normal. Um, so a very similar side to depression, which already tells you that it's not a great thing to do. But I guess disassociating themselves from reality, you'll see the changes, the behavioural changes, depending on what drugs they take. If it's cocaine or a stimulant of some kind, you'll see that their appetite will be reduced. They won't eat as much. They will look thin. They will lose a lot of weight because they won't be eating. If it's something like marijuana, cannabis, they'll eat more because it makes you want to eat. So then you'll see them eating junk food and ice cream and chocolates and everything in one go. That's a sign of someone who's maybe smoking weed, marijuana, cannabis. Someone who's on stimulants, whether it be methamphetamine, cocaine, uh, along those lines, they won't eat at all. So the eating habits will change, the sleeping habits will change, the communication habits will change. In terms of look, they'll lose weight. Usually the eyes will be red in color. The pupils will be red. The pupils are very small, then it's usually a stimulant, or it could be something like ecstasy, a drug like that. If someone is taking heroin, um, look out for marks on their arms. Again, they will also have lost a lot of weight. There'll be a lot of weight loss. So there are a lot of signs, and the smell. In terms of alcohol, you can smell that. In terms of cannabis, you can smell it on the clothes, especially the skunk that people are smoking. You can smell that from a mile away. So the smells can be different. You can't really smell cocaine as such, even though I could. But in terms of alcohol and cannabis, you could smell that. If you see someone chewing a lot of gum, having a lot of mints, that's another sign. But usually it's someone who's acting out of character. They're changing their character. They're not looking at you in the eye. They're sleeping a lot. They're not eating, or they're eating, depending on the drug. So it's quite a few signs. But I think the biggest one is reserved. They are reserved. They're keeping themselves to themselves, more so with family members. But if they're on a high from a stimulant, from methamphetamine, from cocaine, then maybe they might be talking a lot. They might be just talking. So different drugs, depressants, and stimulants do different things, but they both do things out of character. And in both situations, whatever drug or drink that they are taking, um, they they make the individual do something totally out of character. Now that's substance misuse. Then you've got the behavioral addictions. And again, there's similarities. The big addiction we have at the moment is video games and Facebook and social media. Some people are on it so much that it controls their life. That's what addiction is. Addiction is something that takes over your life. It controls your life, regardless of what the consequences are. It gives you that dopamine rush, and you love the dopamine rush so much that it gets used to it, and you want to go to the next level because it gets used to it. You want to increase dopamine all the time, and video games is a massive thing. So again, isolation, staying at home, on the TV, playing the video games, not talking to anyone, not socializing because they are addicted to that. Another big one, I think, for not just video games, not just for shopping, but drugs and alcohol is the bank balance will change because all these things cost money. So uh, their money situation might be uh, might be quite obvious that they're spending a lot of money and they're struggling sometimes. So then with that, if they can't pay for the addiction, then they might turn to crime. They might steal from family possessions. They might do work that brings them money, which is not legal. So there's a lot of signs out there that us parents can look out for. But with the substance abuse and behavioral addictions, they're very similar because it's all about the dopamine rush, and they all both involve money. And if you haven't got the money, you end up doing crime to get the money, or you end up doing things that are perceived to be seen wrong to get the money to feed your habit of whatever addiction it is. So the signs are quite evident. The change of character and the change of behavior and all the other things that I've mentioned, that it's very easy to detect.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% because yeah, I know of a few, young adults personally, and whatever you mentioned, I was just thinking while you were taking the list right, I was like, wow, yeah, these are the things that I have, evidenced myself, these behavioral changes in their personality, getting ticked off very, very quickly, being on the edge most of the time, and the loss of appetite, and yeah, constantly, on video games. So I think there's a huge connection, of that dopamine rush, that the more you get it, the more you want it, and then you just keep on going for the increase and increase, and eventually then what happens, brother Saf? For how long can any person keep doing this? What's the usual pattern before it's a tipping point for them and they feel as though we're done with it now? Obviously,
You know
everything
what?
has a limit. So this dopamine rush would also have a
Yeah,
limit, isn't it?
some people are never done. And today, myself, someone who I was in rehab with, I heard that they passed away because they relapsed. Some people can't get away from it because you can't really do this alone. You need support and you need help, not just from family members, from from different services. What I can reveal about addiction is that if I was to, it's a behavior, right, that gives a person temporary relief and pleasure, but it has negative consequences, which we know. And the individual will return time and time and time again and continue doing whatever they're doing, regardless of the consequences. And it's a tough one. It's like they need to solve the problem. I mean, what people say is that people come into recovery when they've reached rock bottom. For me, it wasn't. That wasn't my story, sister. My story was I was just done. Um, I had a lot of support. I had a lot of help around me that eventually got me into recovery. But for many, many years, and many, many addicts, and many, many people who are entrapped in this lifestyle, for many years live in denial until you can accept until you can admit that there's a problem, there is no way out. That is the first step. Yeah. Until you can get to that position in your mindset that you have a problem, there is no way out.
How
Otherwise,
can we convince? हमारे बच्चों के साथ बात करनी इतनी मुश्किल होती है, specifically when they're going through that downtime, they've just done it perhaps maybe a few minutes ago, maybe a couple of hours ago, and they're still under the influence. उस बच्चे से बात करना, आइस ब्रेक करना इतना मुश्किल हो जाता है. किस तरह से हम रीच आउट करें, अपने बच्चों से कम्युनिकेट करने की कोशिश करें, उनको समझाने की कोशिश करें कि ये चीज आपके लिए गलत है, मुज़िर है, जानलेवा है. I mean, your life is a living hell for as long as you're alive. And God forbid if you reach a point whereby your system just collapses, can't take no more, then too, it's death straight away, isn't it? किस तरह से हम लोग जो है वो अपने बच्चों के साथ कम्युनिकेट करें?
I think it's a thank you for that question, because that's a very, very important question, because I believe that when we find out about our children or someone that we know who have become addicts or who are using drugs or alcohol, we have a tendency to jump on them. We have a tendency to look down on them and shout at them and accuse them for spoiling the family name, the family honor, or say that they're bad people, but we ignore the reasons why one might be doing this. As I said before, the problem is not the drink and drugs. They perceive it as a solution to a problem. What is missing in their life? What is missing in the person's life for them to go down that road? Something is missing, and we have to find that. Then we might say, well, there's nothing missing in our lives. We are a good family. We pray. We do good deeds. There's nothing missing. Well, there has to be something missing for them to go down that road. And then you ask the question, for them to go down that road, it must be because they hang around with the wrong people, which is a big one. A lot of the times you get involved in this lifestyle because of the people you hang around with. So then you have to look at their peers, look at the pressure that they're under. But even then, what is the catalyst for them to actually finally put a drink or drug in their body? But we have to talk about that, and we have to look at what is missing in their life for them to use a drink or drug. Not shame them, not tell them off, but work with them and help them trust us so we can, so we can trust them. It's a trust thing, and it's very difficult to educate the next generation, if you like, or even our generation about their children, because we see it sometimes as a failure as a parent. We see it as it's our fault, or we see it as what have we done wrong, or why didn't we spend more time with each other. That's a big point as well, because a lot of parents are focused in their work, they're focused in their lifestyle, and they think providing for the children, providing for the family is their job and their job only. Again, missing out on a child's life, spending time with them, being present with them, learning about them, asking about what's worrying them. Has anything happened at school? Are they getting bullied? Are they getting pressured by other children to try a drink or drug? Because once you try it, right, and there's a very strong chance that you're going to like it, because it takes you out of reality. It does something, as I said, we go back to it, it gives you that dopamine rush. It gives you a dopamine rush like no other. Yeah, food is a massive dopamine rush. Shopping is a massive dopamine rush. Them too have consequences as well. Just like playing video games gives you a massive dopamine rush. That has a consequence as well. But drink and drugs also has a dopamine rush, but a bigger dopamine rush than what I've just mentioned. And that has serious consequences, like death, like jail, like mental health asylum, homelessness, losing everything. So I think rather than attacking and rather than frowning upon and putting the child down, it's we have to try and find out the reason why one has chosen this. What is missing in their life for them to go down that route? What are they going through? What is happening with them for them to choose? If it is for escape, if it is for survival, what are they escaping from? What are they surviving from? What is it? Now, that's why it's sometimes difficult for parents to address this. And it may need a third person to come in, or someone who knows, someone who's been there, someone who's a professional, or someone who's been there and come out the other side, someone on a level with them, someone who can level with them. Um, Maybe that might be easier. That's why people who go to counselors and empowerment coaches and addiction specialists like myself, and empowerment coach like yourself, um, we can look at things, and we are the third person, and we might be able to get information out of the children that their parents wouldn't be able to get, because they're embarrassed, or they won't always tell the truth to their parents because they're used to a certain kind of response, and hence because of that the trust is not there. So sometimes it's very difficult for the parents to actually address this situation, but it's very easy for the parents to see the signs. And once they see the signs, maybe the parents can give the professionals or people who've been there a call and ask them to take over. All this is immaterial until they admit that they've got a problem. And until they admit and accept that there's a problem with drink or drugs or any kind of addiction, until they can take that first step, it's very difficult to get out of it. And that's why people say that they got to hit rock bottom.
यही तो मसला है ना साहब भाई कि हमारे बच्चे एक तो हमारी बात सुनते नहीं हैं, फिर दूसरा मसला ये भी आ जाता है कि इस मुल्क के अंदर 18 इयर्स के जब बच्चे हो जाते हैं तो वो फिर इंडिपेंडेंट हैं, मेजर काउंट किए जाते हैं, उनकी अपनी से है, तो पेरेंट्स उनके वेल बीइंग के अंदर उनके अपने पर्सनल मामला जो है उनमें ज्यादा मुदाखलत भी नहीं कर सकते लीगली। और अगर बच्चे आपकी नहीं सुनते और बीइंग पेरेंट्स, इफ योर चाइल्ड इज अबव द एज ऑफ 18, पेरेंट्स मुदाखलत नहीं कर सकते, दे कांट इंटरवीन और बी नोजी इफ यू लाइक इन देयर पर्सनल मैटर। So then, I really don't understand that where is it gonna lead? वो बच्चा who's gonna, I understand that you've spoken about the element of being able to slowly, gradually befriend them, build that level of trust with them, whereby they open up and they're able to really come out with the bitter truth that what is the missing gap there that they're trying to fill in, through this solution of addiction, if you may. So that's a very gradual process, and you'd be lucky, you'd be really lucky, you count your stars, if your child eventually opens up with you, one fine morning. But more than likely they don't. As you mentioned, one of the signs is for them to, just become very closed up, closed in, and basically remove themselves from the family, from the social circle where they don't feel comfortable. So then what can we do really? Are there any authorities out there where we can go and report that, look, my child needs help, I'm trying to, put this message through to them, but obviously they're delusional, they're not going to accept that they have a problem, but I can't see my child, perish like this bit by bit every day. What can we do? Can we make a complaint? What can we do to rectify this issue? Because I'm sure majority of our parents out there are suffering this problem and they're feeling helpless. They don't know what to do. They can do what you've suggested. It's a long process though. And again, as I mentioned, you'd be lucky if the child eventually opens up. In more than 100% cases, they don't open up. So what do we do then?
It's apart from education, and surrounding these, if they're under 18, as a parent, as a guardian, we have more power and more control to do something. We can put them into rehab, put them into detox, where they'll be away from the environment, and that's a short-term fix for sure. But if the rehab and the treatment that they are having is good, and they can continue the aftercare treatment once they come out, there's every chance of success. And it's about having a new way of life. I had to change my life everything about it. So rehab and detox if they're under 16, and if they're in denial or they don't want to go, as a parent, because we are their guardians, legal guardians, we have the capabilities of putting them in rehab and detox. Um, Obviously, that costs money, especially if it's a private residential. And if you have the money, then great. If you don't, then you go through the charity sector. Again, there's a process, there's a waiting list, blah blah blah, but you can eventually get there as a parent. Now, if the child is just turned 18, 19, 20, still relatively young, they're still our children, we can't legally do anything. It's a tough one. Do you call the police? Do you tell them about their habit? Uh, will that actually help them, or will that just lead them to more crime? It's we need. I think educating. I think schools need to play a big part in this. Schools need to have people like myself, like yourself, like other professionals to come in and to try and educate our children. People who have been there. They can also go to professionals. Is a counsellor the right person to go to? Why not? It may work, it may not. I don't know, but someone who's specialised in addiction, I guess, is probably preferable. Um, I help clients of all ages, and I help a lot of Asian clients. In fact, I've got 3 or 4 clients from Islamic backgrounds, and they are so broken, sister. They're so broken, and they can't speak to the family members about it. Uh, and the wider family don't know because the name will be shamed, the family's honor, because that's a big thing, right? For Asians, not just for all Asians. So they found someone like me who's an Asian who understands the culture, but also understands the addiction, not just from a personal perspective, but from a professional and an academic perspective. And together we try and work through this from a human behavioral perspective, from an addiction perspective, on a personal level, on a religious level, on a cultural level. And they feel comfortable working with myself through that. But not to say that they can't go with someone who isn't from the same culture. Of course they can. But I think sometimes in our culture, it's easy to work with someone in our culture who's been there. It's not easy to work with someone in our culture who hasn't been there, because they will think that they are being judged, they are being frowned upon. It's very difficult. It starts with education. Maybe people who have been there going to places of worship, going to mosques and talk about addiction. Maybe going there and talk about trauma, talk about the different things that are happening in the societies around the world. Yeah, talk to our children, talk to the adults, talk to the parents who are all in the masjid, and educate for them to be aware. Educate them in such a way that this is like a bimari, this is like an illness, this is a mental state. We can change this if we work together. Humanity is at its best when we work as a collective, when we work in communion. When we don't support each other, it's not at its best. We can do that in our religion, in our culture, in our country.
Absolutely agree with that, 100%, 100%. The other thing that comes to my mind is, but the staff about these energy drinks and drug abuse. I see there's a surprising connection therein. What do you have to say about that?
Again, it's all down to dopamine
Could
rush.
we take that as a sign? If we see our children, leaning more towards these energy drinks, could that be a sign as well? Because there's some kind of a connection.
It's like, for example, these energy drinks. A lot of people drink vodka and energy drinks together. Like the vodka Red Bull is like a well-known mix. So that's one thing. In terms of energy drinks, people drink that one because it helps them stay awake. It keeps them awake for whatever reason. So if you see someone drinking a lot of energy drinks, they're drinking it for a reason. They're drinking it because it helps them be alert. So then the question you have to ask is, why do they want to be alert? Or why do they need such a drink to help them stay alert? And yes, it's usually because of what they've done the night before or what drugs they have taken. And that's usually if they're taking a depressant, whether it's marijuana, cannabis, weed, heroin, sherm, these kind of depressants. If they've taken that, it makes them feel monged out, and it makes them feel withdrawn and lazy. So they need a pick me up. They need something to pick me up. And the other way they can do to pick them up is take a stimulant, which can be cocaine, methamphetamine, speed, angel dust, whatever, or energy drinks, which also can help them pick up. It's not as strong as the other drugs that I've mentioned, but it's legal, it's in the shops, and they can get it quite freely. So energy drinks also it helps with the dopamine rush. The more you drink, the more your dopamine goes. It releases dopamine in you. So it's very similar as a drug, but it's not as dangerous as substances that we use. So yeah, so they are linked. As I say, normally when you have someone who takes heroin to bring them up, they smoke crack cocaine, and to bring them down, they take heroin. Okay, just same with the energy drinks and alcohol. Alcohol brings you down because it is a depressant, and to keep up to a level, they take the energy drinks. For example, they drink vodka and Red Bull because it brings them up and down. It brings them to a level, and that's the same with this. So it balances it out, but yeah, you're right. It's not good. It's not good for you.
Totally messes about with your brain, with your
Yeah,
physiology, with your emotions, with your psychology, everything. You just become a sausage in the end.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Um,
It takes you.
must not
It takes
always
you away
be
from
easy.
reality.
Yeah, yeah. Again, going back to the same thing, that they're basically running away from some bitter truth, and
There's
they've just
something.
taken
There's
this as a
something.
solution again.
There's something missing in there. If someone turns to a drink or drug, or does a lot of shopping, or does a lot of video gaming, the question we have to ask ourselves is, what is missing in their lives for them to do this? And usually, whether it's trauma or whatever, but it comes down to spirituality. If you find someone who's spiritual, and that can also mean a faith in a belief or religion, or spiritual, they for me they go hand in hand. There's very less chance that they would go down this path. So that tells me that if someone is not spiritual and they're going down this path because of an escape, because of survival, because of numbing the pain, because of some kind of trauma, whatever it may be, we have to get them away from that and give them something that gives them the same kind of buzz, the same kind of dopamine rush, and get them involved in some kind of spiritual stuff. But they have to want to and have to accept and admit that they've got a problem in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And to say, for example, if somebody, has come to a point whereby they think, okay, we're done with it now, we've been there, we've done that, and we want to adopt a, different discourse of action in our life. We want to get a grip of our life. We want to straighten our path. So for those people, how easy is withdrawal, and what would cause a relapse?
Yeah, well, firstly, I think it's important that if the behavior, if the drug of choice is alcohol, and somebody who's a daily drinker or drinks excessively, the first bit of advice that I would give is do not stop immediately. Either cut down, reduce, or go to hospital, because alcohol is the only drug in the world that you can die from withdrawals. If someone suddenly stops drinking alcohol just like that, who's been drinking every day, there's a likelihood that they would experience sweats, shakes, and eventually that will turn into seizures, to fits. And if they get to that level, there's every chance that they will die. So if they experience any of those kind of withdrawals from alcohol, have a drink. I know it sounds funny, but have a drink because it could save their life, or go to the hospital. That's the first thing I want to say. Do not stop just like that because it could kill you. Yeah. Regarding drug withdrawals, like from heroin or cocaine, you can't die as such. You can feel very uncomfortable. You can have sweats. You can be fidgety. You can feel sick. You can be vomiting. It'd be a very uncomfortable feeling, but eventually that would go. Again, there is a detox for heroin users. It's called methadone or Subutex. It's like a heroin substitute, which helps you slowly come off heroin. But in terms of withdrawals, every drug gives you a withdrawal. Alcohol you can die from. What I advise is either slowly reduce, again, depending on how much you use. But if you go to rehab or if you go to a detox, whether it's residential or in the community, whether it's through a charity or whether it's through private, they will take you through the process of the withdrawals and help you through that. And then, inshallah, you become abstinent and you have a new way of life. And then that's when the work starts. That's when the work starts, sister. I've been abstinent for a number of years, but I have to be alert every day. I have to be alert every day because outside there's a trigger everywhere. Everywhere there's a trigger. I call them activations. What can activate me to put a drink or drug in my body again? In early recovery, I had to stay away from these kind of environments. I still do now because I don't enjoy them. When you go shopping into Sainsbury's or any supermarket, in early recovery, I had to stay away from the drink section because I've just come into recovery and I'm seeing drinks. It can be an activation for me. I had to definitely part with all my friends who were still in using, so-called friends. I had to change my circle of friends. Um, I made a conscious decision to stay with like-minded people, people who were also in recovery, people who also wanted to have a new way of life, people who were spiritual, people who had a belief in God. For me, that was a big thing for me. I stayed with people who wanted to get to the place I wanted to get to. As when we were drinking and taking drugs, I was staying with people who did the same thing. It works the opposite as well when you're trying to get clean and sober. I'd also stay with the people who had the same ambition, which was abstinence and to have a new way of life. There's activations, there's cues, there's triggers everywhere we go. On the streets, bus stops, on television, posters, everywhere you look, somewhere is advertising alcohol. If you go to certain areas in Birmingham, in London, anywhere in the country, there's certain roads where there's drug dealers. Stay away from these areas because they can be potential cues. They can be potential triggers. This is what we have to take, this is what we got to think about. But on top of that, there's different smells, different clothes. You may have worn a certain garment every time when you did a drink or drug, or a night when you did something really heavy, and that might remind you of something. That can also be a trigger. It all depends on the level of addiction that you were in, because I remember when I was in the madness, someone asked me what my trigger was. I used to tell them my trigger was waking up, because I was so entrapped by addiction. Once I was awake, that's it. I was in on it. I couldn't get out of that lifestyle. The only time I got away from it was when I was sleeping. But once I come into my recovery, obviously I had to wake and look at other things, look at spiritual things, look at things that help me be of service to others, to do good things, to do things that empowered me, that empowered others, and that is why I got involved in the work that I do today. One, it helps me in my recovery, but two, it helps other people in their recovery as well. It's about giving a message of hope, because I was an addict and alcoholic for 33 years, as you know, sister. And if I could come out of that lifestyle, if I could come out of that destruction, the chaos that I caused myself and everyone around me, the overdoses, the stomach pumps, the near-death experiences, if I can come out on the other side, then anyone can.
Alhamdulillah, Brother Saf, you're such an inspiration, such a great role model for so many, young adults, so many adults out there. And I'm sure that, through yourself being a role model for them, they would definitely, the journey of withdrawal or recovery for them, inshallah, is going to become easy. So, Jazakallah khair for coming on board and sharing such valuable information with us. It was a completely power-packed session today that I've had with you. So much information that, I've got from you that I hadn't known before, and the impact, the detrimental impact that these variety of drugs have on your mind and your physiology. It's huge. I mean, as parent myself, I've got two teenage boys, and it was very important for me, to basically identify the triggers and the signs as well, because until and unless I'm unable to identify the whole process of what would trigger them, God forbid, if they went down that road, and what kind of signs to expect. So it's very important for me to know. And now I think I'm quite, well informed along those lines. So yeah, Jazakallah khair. I'm sure there are loads of parents out there, who are in a similar situation. Like myself or like yourself, and would want to know the answers to their concerns. So I think that after today's session, their quest has been pretty much fulfilled, and I'm making a dua, for all those parents out there who are feeling helpless today, all those parents whose children are in addiction. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides them and helps them through this journey of recovery. Ameen. So thank you very much again for coming forward. जी
Thank you.
नाजरीन,
Thank you.
जैसा कि आपने सुना, सैफ भाई को इतनी वैल्यूबल इंफॉर्मेशन उन्होंने आज हमारे साथ शेयर की है। मुख्तलिफ जो ड्रग्स के फॉर्म्स हैं, उनकी इंफॉर्मेशन उन्होंने हमें दी है कि how does it work, and what combinations are people taking at this point in time, और किस तरह से वो बच्चे जो हैं हमारे, वो इस बीमारी का शिकार हो जाते हैं, लाहक हो जाते हैं, किस तरह से उनको रिकवरी की तरफ गामजन किया जाए। और ये सारी जो हमने आज डिस्कशन की है, इस डिस्कशन का जो लोबे लुबाब है, यहाँ की यूं कह लीजिए कि जो की मैसेज है यहाँ पर, वो ये है कि हमें एज पेरेंट्स कॉन्शियस रहना है ऑफ द फैक्ट के हमें अपने बच्चों का दोस्त बनना है, बेहतरीन दोस्त बनना है, उनका कन्फाइडेंट बनना है, उनके साथ एक ट्रस्टेड रिलेशनशिप हमने डेवलप करना है, ताकि बच्चे अपनी जिंदगी में किसी भी मरहले से गुजरे, वो अपने वालिदैन को गो टू पर्सन समझें, वो अपने वालिदैन को अपने लिए एज अ रोल मॉडल लें, और अपने वालिदैन को अपना बेहतरीन दोस्त समझें। और कोई भी प्रॉब्लम अगर उनकी जिंदगी में दरपेश आता है, तो वो बड़ी फ्रीली अपने वालिदैन से आके कंफर्टेबली डिस्कस कर सकें कि अम्मी अबू, मेरी जिंदगी में इस वक्त ये प्रॉब्लम गुजर रहा है, हो रहा है, और मैं उसको हैंडल नहीं कर पा रहा, आप मुझे काइंडली एडवाइस कीजिए कि मुझे क्या करना चाहिए। तो उस पॉइंट पे अगर आपका बच्चा आपके साथ अगर आप ओपन अप होता है, तो आप सोचें कि या आप ये समझ लें कि अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह आपने अपने एक अच्छे वालिदैन होने का सबूत जो है वो दिया है, क्योंकि आज आपका बच्चा आपके साथ ओपनली कंफर्टेबली अपनी जिंदगी के मसले मसाइल के हवाले से डिस्कशन कर सकता है, और आप उनको फिर गाइड कर सकते हैं। तो ये अल्लाह की तरफ से एक अपॉर्चुनिटी जो है वो आपके लिए खुली हुई है, वो दरवाजा खुला हुआ है, जहां से आप अपने बच्चों की इस्लाह की जर्नी जो है वो शुरू कर सकते हैं इंशाल्लाह। तो हमने साइंस भी डिस्कस किए एडिक्शन के, हमने डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ ड्रग्स के हवाले से भी बातचीत की, मालूमात हासिल की, और ये भी हमने हल निकालने की कोशिश की कि वो क्या मामला है जिसकी वजह से, या वो क्या वजूहात हैं जिनकी वजह से हमारे बच्चे हमसे दूर हो जाते हैं और इस बीमारी से लाहक हो जाते हैं। तो उम्मीद करती हूँ कि ये सारी मालूमात जो हमने आपके साथ आज शेयर की है, ये आपके लिए फायदेमंद रही होगी। तो प्लीज बिलखुसूस मेरा ये आप सबके लिए मैसेज, और साफ भाई का भी, you try to build a trusted relationship with your children, become their best friends, become their confidant, so that that door of opportunity for them to come, come to you to seek advice is always open. And then that what would in retrospect happen is that their recovery or their journey to recovery would be perhaps quicker and much more easier, because they will feel as though they have a very tightly knitted support mechanism in the form of their parents and family for them, which is available readily. So inshallah, looking forward to meeting you guys again next week, Monday, same time, between 5 to 6. तब तक के लिए इजाजत चाहती हूँ, आपकी सहेली, आपकी बहन, आपकी दोस्त